One of the things that I've learned from business, particularly when I started businesses, was that when you are a founder or at the top of a business, it can be a very lonely experience. I can imagine that people that run businesses in the room would recognise that. And in fact, I recently invested, about a couple of years ago now, in a adult milkshake business called Mr. Sherrick's, who's founded by a guy called Andrew Sherrick. And I worked quite a long time with Andrew on various things in the setup of the business. And one of the things I said to him was, because he came from Marks and Spencer's, he'd worked at Marks and Spencer's in their food division for many, many years. It's been his whole career. And one of the things I said to him was, just don't underestimate what it feels like to go out into business on your own, having worked for a big organisation for so many years. And a couple of months ago he said to me, you know what, Tim, that piece of advice, you're absolutely right. The first few months and even year of being in business, suddenly he was on his own, he didn't have an infrastructure, he didn't have people to talk to about what he was doing. So I think it's really important that you take the opportunity today to talk to each other as well as listen to me, share your experiences, and if I sort of propose some questions to you, don't feel afraid to stand up and actually sort of give an answer to some of the things that I want to talk about. Briefly introduce Carl, who's going to be doing some of the talk with me today, and again it's interactive, so if he disagrees with anything I'm going to say or wants to add things, he'll do so. Carl similarly has a wide experience both from big business, where in marketing you started your career with was it Procter & Gamble, but from there has gone on to found his own businesses, has had various success and not so success stories as well, and likewise he's going to share some of those stories with you, and particularly on the marketing and sales side of things, because I don't pretend to be a marketeer, and Carl will certainly be able to add things into that. So the real title of the talk is how to grow your business or grow your way to prosperity and happiness. And I like to sort of start with the word happiness, because we all know that the day-to-day businesses that we're in, they have their problems, their challenges, and there are certain days when you get to the end of it and you think, oh my God, you know, why did I ever do this? It's absolutely crazy. And it actually reminds me of a story. I've not told this one before. One part of my background is I was chief executive of Watford Football Club for about 4 years, between 2000 and 2004. And not long after I took that position, it turned out we had nobody looking after the retail side of the business at the time. Now, I have to be honest, I was pretty raw at the time, about 36-year-old. I didn't know much about retail, but I stuck my hand up and said, whilst we find someone to run this, I'm going to look after the retail. And I knew enough to know that, you know, you needed to know what your stock was. You needed to know when it was coming in. You needed to make sure you didn't have so much of the bloody stuff that was being nicked out of a container from outside the stadium. If you had a fairly small retail outlet, which we did at the time, that you needed to lay it out to make it as easy as possible for people to purchase things, have more till points so that actually people could buy things quicker, because you had a very limited amount of time to sell to people, because our main selling time was an hour and a half before the match, and if we'd won the game, half an hour after the match. If we'd lost the game, you could forget it, close the door. Anyway, so I've taken over chief exec. I've only sort of just started, taken on retail. At 9 o'clock one morning, I get a call from one of the young shop girls. Her name is Charlotte. I won't give her surname. And Charlotte wants to inform me that she won't be in today because she has got herself a sexually transmitted disease from her boyfriend. And that is the start to my day and my start of looking after retail. And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. You know, when you're in business, crap happens sometimes, you have those kind of conversations, hopefully not too many of them. And some of what I'm going to talk about today is just stepping back from that, working on the business, not in the business, and reminding yourself of that feeling of when you first set up your business and why you did it. And in a minute I'm going to come back to that. I want to just finish a story about Charlotte, actually, because it is quite interesting, because some of what I'm going to talk about today is people, how important your people are. And Charlotte was a troubled soul. Quite apart from that, she early also in the piece she was accused of having her hand in the till and all this sort of stuff. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I could see there was something about Charlotte, and that she was, you know, she had something about her in terms of her skills and her aptitude for wanting to work at the club. And we moved her from retail to our newly started in-house catering division. And Charlotte went on to be a star. She managed that catering division, and she turned out to have a huge amount of potential. And developing people and making the most of them is, to me, I say it's not a masterclass, but to me and to most businesses, I think it is so important. And it will stick in my mind that the day that I announced I was leaving Watford as chief exec, which was the September of 2003. The staff very kindly, they sort of put together a kind of party or what, a surprise party for me that afternoon. And after I'd been to that, I went back to my office, and Charlotte walked into my office, walked along to my desk, gave me a kiss on the cheek and said thank you. And I think that was a recognition, if you like, of the fact that she was appreciating that somebody had actually sort of seen that there was something in her and taken time to develop her. And I think that's one of the really important things that we need to think about when we're growing our businesses. But to bring it back onto point, does anybody want to offer a few sort of thoughts about how they felt when they first set up their business? You know, that day you decided to do it, day one or just before day one. Has anyone got any thoughts about, you know, how it felt to set up your business when you first did it? Anybody want to offer anything?
I'll give you one thing. Incredibly exciting.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This is the start of my life. That's
Yeah.
what I thought was the most exciting thing.
Yeah.
Downhill from there.
Oh, well, yeah, but that's just about the most relevant thing, and I haven't asked him to say that. So exciting.
And obviously a bit of trepidation because
Yeah.
you're going into uncharted territory.
Yeah.
You really don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You're on your own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. By the way, as Phil has just spoken, Phil is the person responsible for the Clark Howes branding that you see around here. He worked with us. We did a rebrand exercise last year, and this is the manifestation of that. And I would be quite remiss not to say to Phil and tell you all what a great job he did. And again, some of the things we're going to talk about today are reflected in the brand and the way we convey ourselves. And Phil had a lot to do with that. So thank you for that, Phil, as well. So yes, excitement and trepidation, and what I want to do today as well as we go through this is just make sure that we bring ourselves back to the reasons why, that to get that feeling of excitement again. When you've got the day that is no good, the day from hell, or you're working too much in the business rather than on the business, just try and remind yourself of that feeling you had when you first set up your business, because it will reconnect you to why you did it. And I think that is a really important thing to try and do, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go through this. So this is my first real slide. Why? And why, as far as I'm concerned, is the most important word in the business community. It pervades absolutely everything that we do. It pervades how we deal with our customers and clients, how we deal with our people, how we deal with our suppliers, how we're seen to the outside world. When I was first in the profession, I had a client, this is back in the 90s as well, I had a client called Alternative Tentacles Records. I don't know if any of you, some of you might be old enough in this room to remember the Dead Kennedys and a guy called Jello Biafra. Well, that was Jello Biafra's record company, and it was the UK arm of it. And the guy that ran the UK was a fantastic guy called Bill Gilliam. I was going to call him Billy Ray Gilliam, which is his full name. And he had this up in his room. Massive great sign in his room. Why? And at the time I didn't really understand it. I just thought it was his usual sarcastic sort of view on life, but it wasn't. It was all about everything that we do. And as I connect this talk as we go through it, I'm going to keep coming back to the why we do things, because it is absolutely fundamental to everything about business. So I'm going to ask you another question now. I'm going to put these up on the screen as you shout them out to me. Can you just shout out the reasons why you started your businesses, those that are in business here today? What was the reason why you did it? Anybody want to offer me anything?
Freedom.
Freedom. Anything else?
So the need.
The need?
Yeah.
Okay. Free, need, anything else?
To do what I love.
Do what you love. Any others you want to add to it?
And one related to freedom, which is get away from politics.
Okay. Excuse my terrible writing.
Have more time.
Have more time, yeah.
It didn't work.
No, exactly.
Well, and now look, thank you. You see, Phil's been to these before, so he prompts the next slide. So, I've done a few of these talks, and I've also, as I've said, had the luck to have been involved with various businesses. And the slide up there are the most common reasons why I hear people have set in business. I started in business. Actually, there are one or two sort of variations on that now, which I'm going to add to it in future. But commonly, make more money, do a better job than my boss, more holiday time off, which is the freedom bit, more freedom, there it is. Actually, another one that more and more crops up is, and particularly with really successful entrepreneurs, I find, is how something happened by chance, actually, something that they did. So I went to a talk last week, actually, and the guy started his first business. He bought a classic car back from the US into the UK and realised someone made an offer for him for the car and realised there was a business opportunity there, and it went from there. So that was his first business. So started by chance is another one. But my next question is, for anyone that's sort of given an answer there or recognises any of those, is it working out like that? Would you say it is working like that, or are there times where actually you think, Christ, the reason I actually set up isn't happening like that at all, or you've had that experience where you think it's nothing like the reason I set it up? Anybody got any thoughts on that?
You certainly work a lot harder if you're running your own business.
Yeah, so the freedom and holiday doesn't...
disappears, and you're looking at emails at 10 o'clock and weekends and God knows what. Yeah.
And I think that is my personal experience in the businesses that I've run. I see some nodding in the back of the room, and it is very, very common in a room of entrepreneurs or business people that these reasons why they set up, make more money, actually they don't have enough cash. The E-Myth is a title taken from a book by a guy called Michael Gerber. Again, I don't know if any of you have read it, but one of the two main premises of the E-Myth is that people quite often start their own business because they think they can do it better than their boss or whatever, and they go out into business, and the limit of their business is just themselves. They only, in essence, to put it in one line, they are their own employees. And the problem with that is, if that's how you run your business, you might have a nice living, but if you're serious about growing a business, actually you'll never get beyond that. You'll only be limited by your own time, your own ability, and you're just your own employee in the end, and not really probably the reason why you set the business up in the first place. All these other reasons fall apart because you're there on your own, or you're not thinking forward, or you're not thinking about the goals or the reasons that we've just spoken about why you set up in a business. So as we go further into this talk today, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And why it is that some of these things don't really work out the way people thought they would, and about thinking about your business, and I'm going to keep saying it, working on the business, not working in the business, is going to be a very important facet to this. I'm going to go back to why, because I said how important why is, and it pervades everything, and it really does pervade everything, and I want to give a couple of stories to do with why businesses do things the way they do it, and why they do it the way they do it. So let me give you a couple of stories about that. One personal story, one story from the marketing industry, and I'll start with the marketing industry. And apologies if you've heard this story before, but it's a really good one. Back in the 1970s, British Rail, as was then, was an absolutely terrible organisation in every sense of the word. The trains quite often didn't run at all, and if they did, they didn't run on time. There was no sense of customer service whatsoever. The brand was therefore a nightmare. The rolling stock was old, the lines were old. If you ate on British Rail, you could be off for the next couple of days with food poisoning. There are people in this room who just look just about old enough to remember what I'm saying is true. So if you think the trains are a bit dodgy now, nothing like it was in the 1970s. Anyway, the person that sort of took over the leadership of British Rail was a guy called Sir Peter Parker back then. And they decided they were going to put their advertising campaign out to tender. And one of the agencies that responded, I think it was Saatchi, but I'm not entirely certain, responded, and they went to do, the British Rail entourage went to Saatchi's to have their presentation. Arrive at the office to a pretty shabby looking reception, with a receptionist with a couldn't care less attitude, possibly with a fag in her mouth at the time because you could smoke in the office in those days. They said they were here for the presentation. She said okay, couldn't really care, go sit over there, so they went and sat in the corner. The presentation was say for 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock comes and goes, they get to 5 past, 10 past 10. At this point, one of Sir Peter Parker's entourage, not him himself, goes up to the receptionist and said, look, we're here for a presentation about marketing. If someone doesn't come out soon, we're leaving. At which point the receptionist presses a little button on her table, and this scenery disappears to leave you with a most pristine, beautiful looking office, reception area, with a beautifully presented bid team all dressed in their suits, etc., etc. And the lead bid team of the bid team comes to Sir Peter Parker and says, what you first saw is what people see British Rail like now, and what you're seeing now is what people are going to see British Rail once we've finished with the campaign. Now, the railway system in this country is hugely better than it was back in those days, and a lot about that is about customer service and the fact that even if the train isn't working, you get better information, etc., etc. But my point is that even with that marketing campaign, even with that, if they hadn't actually acted out these things, so if they hadn't taken their people and done the customer service, if they hadn't improved their rolling stock, if they hadn't brought those disciplines into British Rail, the marketing campaign would have been for nothing. They had to go and live and breathe what they were being told in this marketing campaign. The why. Why are we doing this? We're here to serve the customers. We're here to get the trains to you on time. We're here to give you good food or better food on the train. And that they went about that. They went about training all their people with customer service, so that actually at the front end people got better customer service, and that wouldn't have happened. They could have had the best marketing campaign in the world, but people's brand depends on what they do. It's not just about what they say. You know, we can call ourselves accountants and business growth specialists. If we don't do it, and some of the other things I'm going to talk about today, then you're absolutely wasting your time. I mean, people will see through it soon enough. So that's one example of the why and where it went well. I'm going to give you an example back with Watford. I'm not going to talk about Watford the whole time, but a why which went wrong. So I don't know how many football fans there are in the room, but my time there I can kind of split between the first year, which was fantastic. I was able to bring some business disciplines in that I'd learned from the outside world by that point. I knew nothing about football, but I had Graham Taylor as my manager, and he was able to teach me about football. It was all great, fine. Graham then decided he was going to leave, and we appointed a new manager, and this is no disrespect to him whatsoever. It was Luca Vialli, big name, won trophies at Chelsea and all that sort of thing, and we lost the sense of why. Watford are today, and always should be, a community club. We started going around talking about ourselves like we were the Manchester United of the Championship. We will never be the Manchester United of anything, and nor should we be. And people asked me about that time and how difficult it was because we got ourselves into an absolute financial mess because of it. We ran the club terribly because of it. I take my responsibility for that. But the reality is, for all the financial mess and the fact in the end we got out of it and we managed to come out of it okay, the fact is, people ask me, well, tell me the one thing you learned from that dreadful experience. And the one thing I learned was we forgot who we were, we forgot the why about what we do. And everything about it pervaded the club. The club was an unhappy place, the changing room was an unhappy place. We had a terrible year. And when we realised it was all going to pop and we had to change it, the very, very first thing we did, it wasn't about the money. And I remember to this day, we had this spider's web of a mind map of all the things we had to do to get out of this trouble. But the first thing we did was to put it quite brutally, we cut the cancer out of the club. We got rid of the people that didn't understand and didn't want to understand the why we did it. And I'm just giving you a practical experience of if you don't get that why right, that's where you can end up if you're not careful. And that's my as you can tell, fairly strong view on why it is. It's important that you understand what you're doing. Clark Howes. So let's take my current business as an example. So our culture and values are on that slide there. It has the 6 values: the integrity, respect, accountability, initiative, excellence and different. And then underneath it, it has the kind of behaviours that we sort of try to carry out, to live, to breathe, to actually support those values and create the culture that we want. Now, I think the most important thing about this, and there are 2 people in this room that will tell you what I'm about to say is absolutely true. This was not the owners of the business telling the staff this is how it is. This is all of the staff coming back with their ideas about what Clark Howes is like to work in and what values we want to adhere to. That true, Anna's? Yeah. And we try, and we're not perfect by the way, it's always an evolving thing, so we're continually trying to improve ourselves. We try to make sure that everything that we do is consistent with that. And again, if you go on our website, I would like to think you get a sense of what Clark Howes is like to work with. So this dictates, you know, what our clients can expect from us, what our customers can, and what our staff can expect from us, and prospective staff. So one of the pieces of work we're doing at the moment is to just try and bring in some interview questions that actually relates to this, so that we can make sure that prospective candidates actually believe this as well, because otherwise we might not be bringing in the right people. But it goes again to the heart of the why we do things the way we do it and how we do it. And I would like to think that all of our clients see us in that way that when we're acting for them. But that's what we're trying to do. And to put it in one line, we feel that if we look after our clients and we look after our staff really well, the money will follow. But it goes to the heart of the why we do things. I want to put up a second, more well-known example. We're going a long way there. Apple's value statement. Now, whether you're a fan of Apple or not, their products, I don't think anybody could really argue with the fact they are a super, tremendous, successful company that produce fantastic, innovative products. Customer service, if you go into any of their stores, is absolutely excellent. That's certainly been my experience and most people I ever talk to. And here is their value statement, and everything about that actually, I believe, manifests itself in the way that it does things. And they clearly try and live and breathe that statement. So when you're comparing an Apple product with, say, Nokia, let's take them as an example, why is Apple successful, why have Nokia had the problems that they've had? Well, I suspect that some of it is down to the vision of obviously Steve Jobs, who we were talking about before, but this is shared by everybody that works there, and it must be, because in terms of you look at the product and the customer service that they actually provide people, they actually seem to do a pretty good job of actually delivering on that. So again, that is about the why, and I have to say I think in every respect that is very important. You can increase the number of customers, and I've put in there of the type you want, and I'm going to come back to that again, because one of the common failings of some businesses when they get themselves into problems is they don't actually understand their customer base, they don't understand whether they're dealing with people they should be dealing with. Quite often they may be, from a financial point of view, they don't pay very well, they don't make any profit on it, but they may just not be very nice people, they don't want to deal with them. You can have various different criteria, but fundamentally one of the ways to increase to grow your business is the number of customers of the type you want. Transaction frequency is another example. So again, taking retail as an example, if you have somebody that's coming to your store, you want to try to be doing things that brings them back to your store more often than once. Transaction value or average sale, again, let's take retail as an example. If you can do things in a retail sense, and I'll come back to the science of it a little bit later on, I'm going to do that in a second, where you can actually increase the value of the time each time the customer comes to pay at your till, then you're going to grow your business that way. And the effectiveness of each process in your business, one example there is lead conversion. So again, you know, if you have a business where you have a number of leads, you really should have a system for working out what your conversion rate is and finding out why you didn't convert that lead. If you don't, you should really try and implement it. But it can also be about other things like costs and etc., how well your process is done. You know, can you cut out some of the costs, etc., etc. So the retail story. So the retail story is about a pet shop, and it started its life as just a single pet shop, much like the type you might see on a high street even today. And a guy bought into the pet shop, and he realised actually that in reality, to grow this business, he needed to start to do some different things and understand his customers a little bit more. First of all, he started measuring how many different customers he's got. So not just the number of people that come through the door, but he wanted to know how many different customers there were, because that is important, because that in the essence is your database, that is your client base. If the same person is coming back 10 times, that might not be such a bad thing, that's probably a very good thing, but you want to know the total number of people that are actually coming to do business in your store. Average transaction value, he didn't realise what that was when he first started, but he had to learn it because he wanted to increase it. So he went around actually measuring, and that's another thing you'll hear me say, you know, really businesses should try to measure everything that they sensibly should be measuring. If you can't measure something, it's very difficult to manage it. So try and measure things, not just the profit and loss, not just the balance sheet, but the key performance indicators underneath it. And I'm going to come back to that point a little bit later on as well. The number of transactions, so the transaction frequency. So again, taking the pet shop as an example, he could sell someone a dog or a fish, but what he actually also wanted to do was sell them the accessories that go with it, so the lead for the dog or the fish food or whatever it was, and that increases the transaction frequency and also the average sale value, so he needed to do that as well. He wanted to understand when customers were in buying mode. And what he meant by that was he tested lots of different things, and he understood actually that in his business, the best time to go up to a customer and ask them if they needed any help was when they picked up the basket. At that point, they were in buying mode, but he worked out that actually before then, actually they didn't really want any help, they just wanted to be looking. But actually once they had the basket, they were in buying mode. And you think about supermarkets today, they are an ever-evolving consumer experiment. from where they place the products, to how they label the products, to where they lay things out, to the smell that they have coming through the actual supermarket. You know, the old famous baked bread makes people want to buy more. I don't know whether that's true or not, but they are constantly looking at how they improve the loyalty schemes. Colours is another thing. Again, there are colour consultants out there. Different colours attract people to buy or not buy. Sizes of counters. You know, the sizes of counters at McDonald's, not a fluke, by the way. They have those sizes of counters for particular reasons. Everything thought through to the finest detail. I guess one of my greatest frustrations with small business, genuinely, if I go to my own high street, I live in a place called Northwood, there's a hardware store there. You know, I go there because I feel like I should do, but they do nothing to really attract me. I mean, I'm lucky if I can find anything in there. There's no customer service. You know, I can tell you what, when I have some time, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to just go in there and say, would you like some help just improving your business? That's not arrogance, by the way. It's just, it's so bad. It's unbelievable. But they just don't do any of this stuff. You know, number of tills. I mentioned that at Watford earlier. You know, number, it's obvious. But if you're in a business where you've got a lot of people coming through, the last thing you want is people leaving the store because they didn't have time they didn't have the time to wait. I mean, so increase the number of tills. Think about the layout of the shop. You know, and none of this is rocket science. This is just working on the business, not working in the business. It's thinking about it, thinking about how you interact with your consumer and how you sell your product. Another thing I thought was really interesting, and he was ahead of his time in this because it was before the internet, was he made himself an expert on the product. So when he sold a product, he would give people information. There was no websites in those days. He gave people information sheets on the products that he was selling, and he would end up getting phone calls in the middle of the night from people just because they wanted his expertise on a particular pet or something, because they saw him as an expert in what he was doing. Nowadays, you see a lot of people doing that on the internet, and actually some of the best sites are about that. That, you know, they're not hard sell as such, but they're going to give you information about the actual product you want to buy. And actually, as a consumer, that makes you then think, oh yes, I'm dealing with an expert there, and actually it makes you want to buy from these people because you think, and hopefully are, getting expertise that you might not be getting elsewhere. So that was an important thing. But these are common challenges, again, from both my own experiences and talking to people about their business. Lack of talented employees, funding cash flow, can't generate more customers, turnover getting higher, profit going down, lack of time, lack of resource. And I've got something there I want to talk about, resource versus resourcefulness, which I'll come back to in a second. But I started by saying, look, you really need to try and remind yourself what your goals and vision are and share it with people, because that helps when you're having a tough time, but it also kind of gives you some of the landmarks that you're going to need through your business life, which is actually why I asked the gentleman there about whether he was having a struggle finding places to do your courses, etc., because you've grown so quickly, or whether actually it's just a question of not being able to get the resource. Because if you take this, there's something called, some people call it a ×5, some people call it a ×10 view of your business. And basically what that means is you stand at the end of where you see the business ultimately being, so it might be 5-10 years. And if your view is, actually I want to exit this business in that period of time for a certain amount of money, you start with the money on this 10 times view, in that you say, okay, if I want to sell my business for, say, £10 million, that might mean I need a profit of, and this is just sort of very broad numbers obviously, I might need a profit of £2 million a year to do that. If I know what my expenses are, I know what my margins are, I know what sort of turnover that drives, and then you then look back at the different landmarks through that business's life. And so you can see at that point, actually, if I need turnover levels at a certain amount, at certain times in the business life, I know how many people I'm going to need to do that, or I think I do. Premises, I'm going to need new premises, and I roughly know when I'm going to be looking for it. People-wise, you know how many people you're going to need, etc., etc., etc. And the beauty of that is, it doesn't give you a precise answer, because I've never yet seen a business plan work. I've never seen it come out as people thought it would, and more often than not it's worse than expected. But what it does do is it sets a framework. It sets a framework for you to be thinking about the business, thinking on, and thinking about when in that time, that period's life, you're going to have to make the critical decisions. So there's one person in this room who I've had the privilege of speaking to about their business before today. You know, I know they may be thinking about putting other locations to their current business. So they think about that, and you need to give the lead time so that you've got time to think it through. You're probably going to need money to do it. If you don't need money, it's going to have some degree of upheaval in your business because you're setting up another branch. And all these things, if you take the ×5, 10 times 10 view, it will help you to actually think about the timescales and when you've got to be doing it. And I really recommend it. I will say one thing though, Mike Tyson, one of the things he said was, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. So I think what he means is you've got to have a plan B, a plan C. You've got to think on your feet, but you've got to have a plan. You know, people who have no goal hit their target with monotonous regularity. And Harvard, they've done tons of studies of this and great places of learning where they've had student years and they've had some of them write down what they're going to achieve and others who have not written it down. And I promise you, the correlation between people writing down what they're going to do to success is much, much higher than people that just kind of find their way around and hope for the best. Often doesn't work out that way.
Now or later, just address the issue of how you pace it so that you don't end up either with you having a heart attack or your key employees having stress diseases. In other words, how do you keep the whole thing workable as opposed to just, you know, you look at the leadership in the UK, the Prime Minister, he's knackered. Knackered 80 days into his next administration. And he's beginning to make cock-ups. You think, what's going on?
Now listen, I started this talk by saying it's not a masterclass, I'm not perfect, and some of the things we keep striving to improve ourselves. So if I take a snapshot of Clark House as an example at the moment, that's probably our biggest challenge actually, and the reason it's one of our biggest challenges is recruiting people of the type that we want is hard in the market at the moment, and I'm going to come back to people in a second, but we have recognised what we need to do to address it. So so to take your question, the way to do it for us, for our business, is that we need better people, and if we've got to invest in those people, and you may take a view, oh my God, that's going to cut my profit or whatever. That is just not the right view. If you believe in your business and you believe that actually by doing more of your business you will make more money, but you have the right people underneath it doing it, and you understand the why, then that investment in the people will generate the return you want in the end. So more often than not, it's a resource issue of some kind. However, one of our departments is definitely struggling sort of with the amount of work it's got on at the moment, and I had a chat with the head of that department last week. Systems and processes. Now again, I'm going to run out of time, I always do this, I'm sorry, but systems and processes, this is the accountancy bit sort of coming out. But it's important for business sale as well. Systems and processes, sometimes people are working hard because they haven't taken a step back to work on the business and think about, actually, can I improve the systems and processes that I have in this business? Now that might be technology and new software, but it might just be the way they do things. So David Cameron or the equivalent of him in any organisation is not delegating, does not have a system and process that supports what they're doing. So too much is ending on their desk, they're thinking they're having to do too much of the day-to-day, and their systems and processes are absolutely failing them. And that's one bit of it, the system and process, and the desire. Quite a lot of people don't delegate very well. They always think, actually, no one's going to do it as well as I can, or they don't want to train people because they haven't got the time to do it. But actually, if you accept that investing in training so that people can do it, and actually they'll never do it better than 90% of the way you do it, because that's the way the human mind is, but they're going to do it well enough because you train them to do it well enough, and you'll develop them. So again, you're developing people. Let me just talk a little bit, actually, let's take the last one, resource versus resourcefulness, because again, a common challenge is lack of this, lack of that, da-di-da-di-da. And don't get me wrong, I mean, you've got to have good employees, you've got to have cash, because cash is king. There's the accountant coming out again. So all those things on there is important. But again, sometimes we can just get hooked into things and a way of thinking that money is always the answer, or doing something in a particular way. And I want to just give a couple of examples on resource versus resourcefulness. So the first one is a friend of mine is a guy called Graham Goodkind. Graham is the founder of a PR agency called Frank PR. He is a creative genius. I'm not just saying that because he's a friend of mine. And one of Graham and my dreams is to buy a grassroots football team. Because we love football, we love grassroots football, and we'd like to buy it. And one of the ones we looked at was our respective boyhood team called Hendon. We didn't get the deal done in the time, and I'm glad to say they found themselves a backer that's really worked well for them, so that's good. But the purpose of this story is Hendon have no money. They have no stadium, it's a basket case. And you would think the answer is just money. But Graham came up with this idea, and he ended up doing it with Farnborough Town, so a similar sort of club. So, and it's out there, this is true. Whereby he had all the players in the team change their name by default to people like Messi, Pele, all the top players of the world. And then he then went out and in this case got Paddy Power to invest a 6-figure sum to basically do a marketing campaign around the fact that they were the best team in the world. Now, it's a fun example of resource versus resourcefulness. You know, he found a way of thinking about getting, and it got them fantastic PR, etc., etc. You know, you can go online, you can find it. It's a true story. So it's one example, and also from the sporting world, another investment that I didn't make, but we looked at something that is a investment around betting on fantasy football league. And I got put in touch with a young boy who had tried to start a business, very clever guy, on a similar theme. It wasn't exactly the same, but it was very similar. And he started his business with absolutely nothing in his bedroom. He had no money, no anything. And he was struggling to find a way to get this competition and this website out to the football market. And what he did was he went and bought, for a relatively small amount of money, tickets for Barcelona versus Real Madrid, some EasyJet flights. He basically packaged up a prize, and he then used this prize to get himself on all the kind of boards and football boards, and he got a huge amount of PR around it and managed to promote the brand doing it that way. And he did that effectively for he got tens of thousands of pounds worth of exposure and what he needed from a marketing and PR point of view, from a simple, innovative, I thought about it, different way, resourcefulness of getting his message out there. And they're just two examples of resource versus resourcefulness, and again about thinking about your business, very, very important. I just want to touch very quickly on employees and give you some real life examples of what we've tried to do at Clark Howes to help us recruit and train staff, that all the things we've talked about that will be great for themselves and great for us. So we've looked at our values and the why we do things, and it's helped us in recruitment. I'm going to read this because I don't want to miss any of it. Which agencies we use, how we use social media. We've looked at retention. The most common reason why employees leave is they don't feel valued, or as we said earlier, maybe they're not getting developed properly. It's not often about the money. So we surveyed all our staff to ask them how they felt about things and what we were doing, what we weren't doing so well. We have events, we have dress down days because that was important to the staff. We have induction programs so that when new staff join, we try and give them that time to learn about Clark Howes and how we do things, etc., so they feel more part of the team quicker than otherwise they might have done. We have buddy and mentor systems for new staff coming in, so the buddies are there for the first few months to help them with those questions you get when you first come into a new place of work. And the mentoring is about the development of staff, so people that we can see should be accelerating through and have a clear vision of what they're trying to achieve in the organisation. We have mentor systems. We increased our holidays, so we give a birthday, we give people's birthdays, we give Christmas Eve, we have a 5-year sabbatical again, so if you've been with us for 5 years. These are all examples of how you encourage staff retention, because again we've talked about recruitment, but I think, Roger, you kind of touched on it. Again, the best thing to do is keep the best staff and find ways of doing that. The turnover profit thing, again, I've seen so many businesses that do this, where anybody can sell £1 for 99p. People talk about their business being, I've got a £5 million turnover business, 10 million, I don't care. Actually, what really matters is, from a financial point of view, what profit are you making? Do you generate cash? In fact, you've got an X million pound turnover business. You may be busy fools. You might be, and you've got to therefore understand what you're selling, how you're selling it, why you're selling it, and who you're selling it to. And that does involve looking at the numbers and measuring what you're actually trying to do. The key really to the question you asked before about time and people looking absolutely knackered and that sort of thing. Again, there is this difference. I don't know, again, in the room if people have read Steve Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But one of the concepts he introduces is this idea of urgent and important. If you're constantly working on the urgent, firefighting in other words, you're never going to get out of that vicious cycle. You need to find time to work on the important stuff that grows your business, and there is a great difference between urgent and important. And again, just taking Clark Howes as an example and other businesses I've been involved in, we try to get the leadership group away from the office for a day every quarter, to force ourselves, if we have to go back to the plan, see how we're doing, think about the things that we should be evolving, working on the business, coming up with new ideas, seeing things that haven't gone quite so well, thinking about the strategy, early, that kind of thing, and taking ourselves out of the business for at least a day every quarter. Try and achieve that discipline. I know it sounds hard, and the other thing I want to say is we're talking about a lot here today. There's quite a lot of content, and this is an almost abridged version of a whole day program that I do with clients and potential clients. And one of the first things I say is it might seem like a mountain, some of this, because if you're not doing any of it, or it might seem you've got lots and lots and lots of things to do, you take it one step at a time. At the end of our business planning day, we come up with an action plan, and it prioritises what needs to be done in an order, and it kind of gives deadlines and who's responsible for doing it, and it hopefully deals with that sense of I'm going to be overwhelmed by all of this, because you have to start somewhere, and prioritisation and working on what's important and doing that, you'd be surprised how quickly you start to actually see the changes and the improvements of the types of things we're talking about. Goals and visions we've talked about. I'm going to skip very quickly through organisation chart. This is just again about thinking forward. You know, if you've done that exercise where you've got your plan and you've broadly got an idea of when you think things are going to happen, you need to think about the people you're going to be employing, when you're going to be employing them, how you're going to be employing them. And that line down there, how will you recruit, hire attitude, teach functionality, is in a line what we've been talking about. You know, you want the attitude. It's not always about, we don't go out of our way to employ people that have A grades at A levels or have Oxford. I'm not disrespecting that. Great that people have those exams, but our view is actually we're looking for people that have a real desire to do what they're doing, and try and find out why they want to do it. And actually, you know what? I've also found out in life that shit happens, and I quite like to have people next to me who have demonstrated an ability to overcome challenge. You know, if you have someone in front of you that found things too easy, you don't really know what they're going to be like when things get tough. I quite like to have people around me who know what it's like to roll up their sleeves and get involved in the fight. That's my personal view. I'm not saying that everybody should feel that. But hiring attitude and teaching functionality is an aspect of that. Amazingly, for an accountant, we have the finance, business plan and cash flow bit. I'm going to talk about two things very quickly about this. One is obviously cash is key, and funding. Just think about the different ways of funding. So there's a traditional overdraft, bank loan if you can get them, you know, equity financing, friends or family, your own pocket and that kind of thing. Just think about some of the other areas that you can get funding. Invoice discounting and factoring has a bad name in certain places still. It is a much improved industry. It is not that much more costly than traditional funding. It can work very, very well if you have a working capital requirement as you grow your business. The downside to it is if you end up in a situation where you lose a big client, like I did in one of the businesses that I was involved in, it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, because suddenly you find almost overnight you don't have as much money to play with as you needed. But for a growing business done in a sensible way, invoice discounting is an option, and crowdfunding. I have quite a lot to say about crowdfunding. If you want to talk a bit more about it, talk to me afterwards. There are two methods of crowdfunding. One is equity crowdfunding, where you're getting other shareholders. Mr. Sherrick's I referred to a bit earlier, we just did a raise. We raised I think about £175,000 on Crowdcube. The other thing I wanted to talk about was non-financial KPIs, and I've put EasyJet as an example there. So, you know, we can get bogged down in the profit and loss, the balance sheet, but we talked earlier about measuring things and trying to have a dashboard, they call it these days, of understanding what's actually happening in your business. So EasyJet, or airlines as an example, a non-financial KPI for them is how quickly they turn the planes around, or how many bums they have on seats. So it's not the pounds and shillings and pence. They'll have a dashboard that says how quickly, what's our average time for turning the plane around, because that's absolutely critical to the rest of it. And they have a dashboard of these KPIs. Try and develop some for your own business. It's really important. Hotels. I back in the day advised the Meridian Hotel down in London. You know, one of its key performance indicators obviously is occupancy. You know, you don't need to see the pounds and shillings and pence. If you know your occupancy rate, it's telling you quite a lot about that business. Truckcom is a technology business that I'm an investor in. One of our non-financial key performance indicators is how many technicians it requires to support a customer. Because if we get that ratio wrong, then it's going to have a massive impact on our business. So we look at that as a KPI, and every month we get the KPI sheet and we see how we're doing. So think about non-financial KPIs as well. They are important. If you are growing a business, this might be relevant to everybody, because some people see succession as family succession, and they might not be trying to sell the business, but But you need to think, you really do need to think about it. If you've got a business where you've got more than one shareholder, for example, you've got more than one owner, you need to think about whether you've got a common view on what the exit is, because if you haven't, you should deal with it early. I'm also a commercial mediator. I've seen so many arguments between shareholders born out of the fact that one third person wanted to do one thing and one person wanted to do another. If they'd known that from the outset, actually you could have dealt with and had mechanisms in the shareholder agreement that deals with it. But again, it does all link to everything that we've been talking about. And getting exit ready, systems and processes. I'll put down there a slide that says, do you like McDonald's? I mean, anybody could go into McDonald's, have a couple of days training and make a hamburger, make a milkshake. You're not dependent on the owner of the business. And particularly for people business, like accountants, marketing agencies and that kind of thing, one of its great struggles in terms of how do they get the most for their business when they come to sell it, is the dependence on the owner. And everything we've been talking about today about having systems and processes to support that, having good people so it's not dependent on the owner, all supports this, that you're getting sale ready, that you've got a business that stands alone as much as it possibly can do for the buyer that wants to buy it. Because if you don't do that, you'll either struggle to sell it full stop, or you certainly won't get a premium for it because that person is dependent on you. And if you're very dependent on you, it'll be very, very difficult to sell it. So all those boxes there that I'm having to talk about very, very quickly, they are really important in terms of getting yourself exit ready or even succession ready if it's a family member that's going to take it over. Because I'm going to hand over to Carl.
You're going to play your videos then?
I'm going to play my videos at the end.
After the end?
I'm going to send people out on a high.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay, we actually, thank you for that, Tim. Yeah.